Welcome to Fly Nubian Queen Network, the network for melanated people like you. I am your host, Mary Dean Esquire at thewallstreetlawyer.com, and I am here with two beautiful, black, brilliant lawyers. We got Vanessa Olivier Esquire, former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney. And we also have Mr. Mustafa Indanusa, partner at DNIS. And today we are going to be talking with you from a legal perspective about Bill Cosby. They done let a brother out. They done let a brother loose. I got to do a dip for Bill Cosby. All right, Vanessa. So what do you think? Give us some commentary on, give us your perspective of, are you for or against it? Because as you guys know, when the black community gets in an uproar, everybody knows about it. And this has not just the black community, but the United States of America is all flipped on top of its head. They done let another brother go. So we ain't been this flipped on our head. According to CNN, we have not been this flipped on our head since they done let OJ out. They are comparing old brother to OJ Simpson, who done allegedly murdered his wife. Murdered. Okay, so how do you weigh in on this, Miss former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney Vanessa Olivier Esquire?
Well, I mean, I think I'm split, like a lot of our folks are, and a lot of melanated folks are, and I think the reason I'm split is because, there's a part of me that seeks justice for the victims of these crimes, and there's another side of me that the legal side of me, the lawyer side of me, that really understands that this might be an unpopular belief for those people who think that justice wasn't done here, but there are some legal things, some legal issues that are majorly that are very important, and due process is one of them. So this is more of an issue of due process and whether Bill Cosby's due process rights were received. And in this instance, I specifically think that they were not, which is why I stand behind what the Supreme Court has decided with regards to this case.
Now, specifically, the details. What, from a legal perspective, why did the Supreme Court overturn this decision?
Because
not the Supreme Court, just the Court of Appeals, right? It didn't go all the way up to the Supreme Court. I want to be political.
I believe it's the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that overturned it.
Okay.
And in this instance, the reason why it was overturned was because Bill Cosby had an agreement with the first prosecutor in this case. I believe it's DA Castor, and in that agreement, he was essentially promised immunity for giving certain information in regards to this case, and that immunity was not granted. And but for that immunity being granted, he would not have admitted to certain other things with regards to this case. So in this instance, a lot of the testimony that came as a result of those initial admissions would not have probably been there. And so because he wasn't given the immunity that he was initially promised, a lot of what happened subsequently is null and void, in my opinion.
Okay. Now, was this agreement made in a civil matter or another pending criminal matter?
It was done essentially, I believe, if I'm, and correct me if I'm wrong, in a proper before, outside of the criminal and civil cases. It was made in conversation with the DA before the pending matters.
Okay, how do you weigh in on Mustafa?
So I think I'm maybe a little bit less conflicted than Vanessa, but that's because for good or for bad, I tend to just look at these things almost strictly as a lawyer in that sense. And again, it's not to take away from any of the rights that are due to the alleged victims in this matter, but I feel so I don't get, it's not even that I don't want to be emotional about it, because I can't be emotional, but it's rather just to try to keep a level head about things. I have to approach it from that perspective. And before we got on, Vanessa and I were talking about how a lot of lay people just don't know how the law works. So that's why sometimes when things happen, they're all in the uproar. How can this be? How can you let him go? Well, that's just the way the law is. And you can't have it both ways. You can't have the law working when you want it to work for defendants, and you don't want it to work for defendants at different times. It has to consistently work for people. And the times when it doesn't work is why you have this mass incarceration that we have in this country, is when the law fails people who are in the same position that Bill Cosby was.
So let me get this. Okay, in the same position. So do you guys? Because he admitted to some things, right? He admitted to some things in his deposition, though, and for me, every time I looked at it, because it seems like you guys, both of you guys, have the opinion that maybe he did it. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I mean, I guess no one would know for sure, but there's this consensus that some people think he did, some people think he's innocent. He's actually innocent. So, how do you guys weigh in on that, or do you have an opinion about that one way or the other?
I think the law really separates literal innocence and legal innocence. And what we're talking here is a matter of legal innocence. And with respect to his constitutional rights as a defendant, I don't think we were able to really get into the literal innocence as much as we would like to, because his due process rights weren't followed in this case. So there's procedures that have to be followed.
Pause. Run that back and say that again, Vanessa.
What I'm saying is we have to make the distinction here between his literal innocence, like, whether or not he really did the crime, versus legal innocence, whether or not that can be proven. And in this instance, he had certain due process rights that were violated, and it really kind of convoluted whether we could get to that literal innocence. So there's some stuff that was happening in the background, some legal stuff that really skewed the way in which this case went. And unfortunately, trying to redress it with a third trial after he was already violated of due process, the court decided that that would be further due process violation. So this is like the literal innocence I kind of put to the side as a lawyer, because I don't really think that this case was able to be tried the way that it should have because of all of the stuff happening in the background. So that's why I'm personally torn, because we have some issues between two different prosecutors, one making him a promise and the other one not keeping that promise. And those things really mucked up the way that the rest of this process went. And so I really feel like I don't know if we'll ever know or really ever get a chance to get to the bottom of this because of some other issues that happen. And that falls on the shoulders of the two prosecutors that were working on this case before we even took it to trial.
Those are excellent comments by Vanessa Olivier, the former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney. And if you're looking to grow your business, please check out flynubianbusiness.com. If you're looking to better manage your money, please check out flynubianmoney.com. You can always find me, Meridine Esquire, online at thewallstreetlawyer.com. And we are here live on Fly Nubian Queen Network, having attorneys, all attorneys, everybody on this roundtable today is an attorney, and we're all weighing in on what our perspectives of the Bill Cosby being released from prison. And what about the fact that he served jail time for the past 3 years? If he was found guilty, I mean, innocent, God, get it right. If he was found innocent, what about the fact that an innocent black man sat in prison for 3 years? An old innocent black man.
Well, he wasn't found innocent. And in fact, he wasn't even found not guilty. It was just as his guilty verdict was overturned. As Vanessa was saying, the difference between sort of legal innocence and sort of like real kind of innocence where the person actually didn't do it. In Bill Cosby's case, you have sort of like the third option. So in any case, if somebody's found not guilty does not mean innocent. In court, we don't answer the question of innocence because a person comes into court, a defendant comes into court with a presumption of innocence. Doesn't mean the person is actually innocent, the person didn't actually do it. It just is a presumption. And then after all the evidence has been laid out, then the jury has to make a determination whether or not they've been convinced beyond a reasonable doubt to shift that position of innocence to guilty, right? So that's not even what happened in Bill Cosby's case. He was found guilty, but then the court said because of certain due process violations, we have to overturn this guilty verdict because he wasn't really given, in a sense, a fair trial. So what happened? One of the things we kind of forget about this particular case is there were 2 trials for Bill Cosby. Remember, the first trial was a hung jury. So you had a panel of 12 people they could not come to a decision. And that says something to me. If I'm an attorney, I'm his attorney, that says to me that the jury did not believe the testimony of the witnesses, or they did not, because in this case, we don't have any like DNA, we don't have anything except just testimony of the witnesses. So the jurors themselves were conflicted about whether or not they believe the testimony of the witnesses in the first go around in the Bill Cosby case. So in terms of real innocence, can somebody glean from that maybe there was enough evidence to say that he really didn't do it? But then the second trial, more witnesses were allowed to testify in the second trial, and then we end up with a guilty verdict. Was it because more witnesses were allowed? I mean, if you ask some of the, I forget the name of that famous attorney that sometimes represents a lot of people in these type of situations, she made a comment that maybe the second go around, the judge will allow more witnesses, and hopefully we get a different verdict. And that's pretty much what happened. More witnesses equaled a different verdict for Bill Cosby.
I remember that. I remember that. Which then, you know, so was he really convicted in the media first? Did he really get a fair trial? Where did all these witnesses come from? So I remember every time. So from my perspective, I feel like everybody partied back in the day. And one of the messages that I sent you guys was a repost on Instagram. And I would pull it up here, but Instagram, I can't play the video on my desktop because Instagram is made for mobile devices. So I'm going to play it for you in a second. But the post, this is what the post said. Now I am a woman, so I am no way give my disclaimer for you people out there. I am a female and I am in no way condoning any type of drugging or violence against women. I'm on the complete opposite side of that. But I am also, as a person who used to be a staff attorney started my legal career as a staff attorney for aid to victims of domestic abuse. And so, you know, and I ended up divorcing my ex-husband for the same thing. So I was very clear with victims that, you know, you are your first line of defense. You are your first line of defense. I'm not no dang on victim. I'm not going to curse today. I'm not no darn victim. Okay. And so because I'm not no darn victim, that means I am my first line of defense. And every time that I would read some of the stories and the women's commentary about Bill Cosby, it sounded like they wanted it, you know, or that they didn't have enough gumption about themselves to turn him down because of his status as Bill Cosby. Which still to me says you want it, or you ain't got enough woman backbone to say you don't want it, which is not the same thing as rape. Rape says, I don't want it, and you force it on me. That's rape. I remember one woman's testimony where she said, he put it out in my face and I turned my head. Well, girl, if you're doing all of that, you got enough sense to get away if you wanted to. So the testimony that I would hear, just, you know, it was always sketchy to me. So I want to play this clip. I'm going to play it on my iPad. I went out to get my iPad. I hope you guys can at least hear it. Let me see here if this is going to work for me. Stand by.
I had 3 blue pills in his.
Okay. So he says, how many women have taken drinks from men that gave them drinks only to loosen them up to have sex? I'm paraphrasing because his language is worse than mine. How many women have gotten high with the man that gave them the drugs only to loosen them up to have sex, and y'all have sex? Be honest. So this was the first, and then it scrolls.
He had 3 blue pills in his hand. 3 blue pills. 3 blue pills, and he put his hand out, and I said, "What are those?" And he said, "They'll help you relax." And I said, "Like, are they natural? Are they like a herbal remedy?" He said, "No, they're your friends. Just put them down. They're your friends. They're your friends. Just put them down." Swallow. And he hands me some water. I get some water somehow, and I swallow the 3 pills down. Why do you do that? I took them because I trusted that they would maybe just help me feel a little more relaxed. You trusted him? Yes, I did. Yes, he had 3 blue pills.
Now, if you at the party and somebody hand you 3 little blue pills and tell you to swallow this because they're your friends, and you actually swallow them, and then she says, "Oh, he gives me," first she says he gives me water, and then, "Oh, I get some water somehow." If you're that coherent that articulate about the event, and you're that no one snuck the roofie in your drink. You didn't. No one. He didn't trick you and tell you it was a peppermint and make your breath smell good. He didn't tell you this was medicine to make your headache go away. He told you they were your friends. Take them down. So if you don't have enough sense to know that you're taking a drug, you don't even know what it is, that the party is about to start with you in it. If you don't have, to me, that's kind of asking for it. And so the testimony that I kept hearing repeatedly, and even the things that he admitted to giving people illegal drugs. He didn't admit to necessarily giving people, and correct me if I'm wrong, he did not admit to giving people illegal drugs against their knowledge.
I think it's dangerous to try the case with only some of the information. And for me personally, I wouldn't go down that road. And the reason is because I think that one of the things that you might not be really acknowledging is there's a power differentiation here when you're dealing with a person like Bill Cosby. So I think that has to be put out there. Like, we're not just dealing with just any person. We're dealing with someone who in many ways have power over a number of people's careers, over a number of people's jobs. And so the specifics of how these things played out matter, as in any case, the specifics matter. So I'm hesitant to go down the route where we're actually pulling in that information to really get at that. I think that, the literal guilt with respect to whether or not he's guilty or not is not so much as at issue here. And I think it's hard for us to get to that because of all of the stuff that happened with regard to the lack of due process. So that's, I think, the issue that we really need to focus on, and not go down the slippery slope of trying to try the case in the media, which, is happening anyway. But as attorneys, I don't think it's responsible to do that, because we're pulling partial information from various dates and times instead of really looking at the case critically. And I think that we can't even get there because we're talking about violations that happened before we could even get to those parts of the case. And the question I asked myself is, were we able to get full information from these witnesses, from these, alleged victims, if, he's waiving his Fifth Amendment right, his constitutional right, and that waiver is creating this kind of is where all this other information is coming from. So we're talking about a trial error. We're talking about an error of process that makes it very hard for the rest of the stuff to be trusted and to be valid, in my personal opinion. So I wouldn't even address those things here with you guys, because I feel like we can't do that here. I don't think that that's fair to the alleged victims. I don't think that that's even fair to the defendant or the prior defendant in this case.
That's really interesting, but I think we cannot not look at this in a bubble. This is, every time you have a Black man who touches the pole, the beautiful white swan of the white woman, right? That is always the basis of so much turmoil in the Black community. That's why the media itself is comparing this to O.J. Simpson, because they want to compare his crimes or his alleged crimes to that of an alleged murderer's crimes, which is not one and the same. And so when Felicia Rashad came out and in support of him, what she blatantly said was, "I'm glad justice was done, because I didn't understand," and I'm paraphrasing, but I didn't understand why they went after him like this. Everybody, the hush, the rumor mill says that he was in the works of buying NBC. This is what the articles are reporting on. Absolutely. This. That he was in the process of buying that network, and then they shut him up and silenced him with this kind of with these criminal charges. Now, when we can say, "Oh, well, we can't look at this in that way," we can't look at this in a vacuum. We can't. What did you say to me? Because I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, I was saying with respect to basically putting the witnesses on
trying the case. We can't try the case here, but they have crucified this man in the media, and I don't think. And if nobody stands up for he's our Black leader. He's a black leader in the sense that he gave a lot of black people a positive role model as far as a father figure in the 80s and 90s era when people didn't have fathers in the homes like that and mothers in the homes like that. So they gave Black Americans hope. They gave us an image of a Black perfect kind of family and something that we could all aspire to. He was kind of he wasn't just Black people's dad, he was America's dad.
Absolutely.
And the fact that they have willingly just crucified this man, you know, and as I'm reading the testimony, as I listen to this witness right here, I'm sorry, but if they're going to crucify this man and I'm going to go do my own research and you listen to the actual witness, I can form my own opinion, especially when I know that I live in a society where the mainstream media is always painting this narrative to demonize and take away our Black leaders. They always do that. We couldn't have Malcolm X. They took him. We couldn't have Martin Luther King. They took him. And by no means am I comparing him to some of those great men who sacrificed their lives for the movement. But I can't help but see that the parallel, because I just came back from Black Wall Street, blackwallstreet.com, guys, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And even that whole Tulsa, Oklahoma, and whole Greenwood burned to the ground started with the Black man who allegedly he tripped and fell on a white woman accidentally, and they crucified and burned down a whole town because of that.
Uh-huh.
So I just can't look at them putting this man on trial, and he wasn't supposed to be on trial. It was a huge technicality. They weren't even supposed to try the freaking case. That's what time it was. They weren't even supposed to try the case. You know how insulting it is for a judge to be overturned and a higher court above them? You know that. You two are attorneys. No judge ever wants to have their case, taken up to a court above their head. And when you have a case especially of this kind of magnitude that goes all the way up there, and a Black man at that, and it gets overturned, to say that they weren't even supposed to try the case. So
I think all Vanessa's trying to say is, because we weren't there to listen to all of the evidence, it's difficult to sort of opine on little bits and pieces. I get what you're saying, Mary, but it's difficult to opine on little bits and pieces that we hear. As a defense attorney, if I had that piece of evidence, that would be gold for me. That's something I'm going to use all day. I've done sex crime cases. I don't know if Vanessa's a defense attorney, but I don't know if she's done those cases, but I've done those cases. And those are the kind of things that you're looking for and try to use to convince a jury that maybe the testimony of the alleged victim should not be believed. As I mentioned earlier, remember there was another case, right? There was an earlier case that was a hung jury, and maybe they heard the same things, and maybe that's why there was a hung jury. And at least one juror on that case said, I just cannot reach a guilty verdict, or the reverse, I just can't reach a not guilty verdict, because we don't know which way it swung. It could have been 11 juries were saying not guilty and one was saying guilty, or the reverse, 11 jurors saying guilty and one saying not guilty, or whatever the makeup could have been. We have no idea. I think the sort of trying to connect this case to the O.J. Simpson case, as you said, he's getting crucified in the media. No idea. It's trying to connect them and make them as if they're the same type of case. They're totally different types of cases. I always joke, or at least I've joked in the past, that to me, the O.J. Simpson case is probably the most important event to have happened in Black America after the Emancipation Proclamation. Because it showed you something. If you have the money to bring together a team of lawyers that can combat what the prosecutor is saying with DNA evidence, DNA testimony, experts, you have a shot. If you don't, forget about it. Now you go to the Bill Cosby case. He had all the money. He had the experts, perhaps, if they even had used experts in his particular case. I'm not sure if there was a need for experts. I don't think there was. But the problem with his case, why the two have nothing to do with each other, why they should not connect the two, except for the fact that it's a Black man and a Black man, high-powered Black man, high-powered Black man, white women involved. That's the only similarity. But really, the two cases are completely dissimilar. You have a Bill Cosby case where he's found guilty, and in the court, as you mentioned, Mary, and as Vanessa has also mentioned, the court said this should have never even happened. How did we get to this place where this man was tried? When the prosecutor said, hey, if you give testimony you're good to go. We're not going to prosecute you.
Yes.
And then he did exactly that, and then turned around and prosecuted him anyway. Why? Well, maybe that's the thing for different levels of conspiracy theories. But
I got a few.
yeah, I know you do. But it should have never happened to begin with.
I agree, and I think that that my point is exactly that, and also that it's dangerous to try the case now with just the snippets that we have, especially as lawyers. I think that we can't encourage that, and we have to encourage people really getting clear as to what is the judicial process. But as a person, as a human being, I hear you, Mary. I mean, I became in part a lawyer because of Felicia Rashad, because of the Cosby Show, and I understand how important Bill Cosby is to our community, what the legacy that he created through the shows, through the sitcoms, like everything that he worked on, his life mission, and how this criminal case really kind of, or these different criminal matters and even civil cases really kind of go like take that entire legacy, like make us all question that entire legacy to some degree. So I understand what the emotional side of that when it comes to this matter, but I think it's our responsibility as folks to like really think about the place in which we put our leaders. They're still people. You mentioned Malcolm Martin. I think one of the things that we do oftentimes is that the image of our leaders is becomes more important than who they are as like individuals. And so in this case, we have the questionable activities of one of our leaders coming into play against the legacy that he created in terms of all of the scholarships, all of the shows, all of the symbolism with respect to the Black family that his shows created, in terms of the upliftment via education through shows like A Different World and the various scholarships that he supported. Like all of those things get now questioned because he has this criminal case. I think it's very dangerous for us to conflate the two as individuals, and we have to start learning how to separate the person from the mission. And I think that's our responsibility as people, as individuals, to be very clear that leaders are still people, and just because they may be accused of something should not take away from the legacy that they lead. That's two different things, and I feel like it's very important that we look at those things separately in this case, because it's very dangerous when we try to put those two things together. If that's the case, then any of our movements can get shut down because of any kind of exposure with respect to our leaders as being flawed in any kind of way.
But Vanessa, taking off the lawyer hat for a second, maybe the point also that Mary was trying to make, and I think you sort of touched on it here when you're talking about separating our leaders sort of as being these statues in our community and what they have contributed to the community versus these maybe ugly accusations against different leaders. Is look at Bill Clinton, right? He's still lionized. Donald Trump, as bad as he is, and he's been impeached, he's still walking around free. Nobody's really saying anything. People hate Donald Trump, not because he said, I'm going to be, grabbing women's private parts, but because of other things. And the list is long. Our current president was accused of things, and you can even say anything about it when people try to talk about
accused of pedophilia. Okay, it's all over the internet.
Whatever the case might be, the list is long on many people who are not Black, who have been accused of something either equal or worse, and they're just walking around and they're still hailed. What's the name of that? The famous movie director that happened in Hollywood? No, not Woody Allen. He's living in exile in France or someplace, or Switzerland, I forget. Roman Polanski. Right, Roman Polanski was accused of raping a young girl. He's still lionized, and they still talk about his greatness and things like that. Why is it that when it comes to Black men,
it's not done?
It's not done. And again, it's not to make an excuse. If it's bad for white men to do it, it's bad for Black men to do it. But why is it treated in a different way when it's Black men versus when it's white men?
Yep. Why do we crucify them so bad? And and not to say, because I feel like what I'm about to say is going to counter that and demonize one of my great leaders. But you know, one of the Black Panthers wrote that book, Fire and Ice. This kind of crushed my soul when I found out he authored that book, Fire and Ice. Have you read that? Are you
No.
from Eldridge Cleaver? And he that book is a disgusting book about how he raped white women. And before he got good at raping white women, he practiced on raping Black women. It's very disturbing to me. But I said all of that to say, when you're talking about us, that book got a Pulitzer Prize. That book got a Pulitzer Prize. It got a Pulitzer Prize. And, you know, you will never understand it. I think that Bill Cosby stepped on the wrong person's toes. And I think they just gonna make a lesson out of that boy. And that's just, you know, and it's my opinion, but I feel like we have a responsibility to, I don't think it's dangerous for me to do my own trial and do my own research and gather the facts for myself. I think that it's dangerous not to. I think that everybody out there, you are your own sifter of your own reality. Perception is reality. And so I encourage everybody out there, because this is the network for intelligent Black people. I encourage all of you to do your own independent research and you sort the facts for yourself and decide if that man if that man should be criminalized, penalized, and thrown away, locked away, never to be heard of again. If that's your decision and if that's what you conclude, that's what you conclude. But I urge you to go beyond mainstream media. Go beyond the article that's going to be on CNN. Go beyond the first page of Google. So you're going to have to really follow some conspiracy on the outskirts kind of. You're going to have to go on the outskirts for this kind of intel. But I encourage you to go there, because that's why, which is why, oh my gosh, we have networks like Fly Nubian Queen Network, the network for melanated people like you. So if you're looking to better manage your money, please check out flynubianmoney.com. Or if you're looking to better grow your business, please check out flynubianbusiness.com. You can always find me, Mary Dean Esquire, online at thewallstreetlawyer.com. And tonight, we are talking about, it's Thankful Thursday. I almost forgot going on Bill Cosby for so long. But every Thursday, Thankful Thursday, you're going to find me here on Fly Nubian Queen. And first and foremost, I chose Thankful Thursdays because you got to find some things to be thankful for. So I'm going to be thankful that they done gave us back one of our heroes, and he ain't dead, God forbid. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, rest in peace. May your souls stay in my heart forever and ever. Amen. And but I'm gonna be thankful that we got one back out. I'm gonna be thankful for that. But I want to ask my guest today, because it's so many times we get on these channels and we get in this space of Black empowerment, and I remember so many people always pointing out all the problems in the Black community, and I wanted to go kill myself after that. And because I didn't feel, it made me feel worse. I came in this group to be empowered, and I walked away feeling worse. So I said, this is going to be Thankful Thursday, and I want to speak thankfulness and things to be thankful for over your lives. I want you guys to get in the habit of that, because the more that you are thankful and you find things like muscle memory, like learning an instrument, learning, getting fine, muscle memory. The more you start being thankful and continuing to saying you're thankful, you will get back more and more things to be thankful for. So all that being said, Vanessa Olivier, former prosecutor and former criminal defense attorney. What are you thankful for?
I'm thankful for this conversation. I'm thankful to speak to colleagues that I am very proud of, and that I believe are doing very good work. I'm thankful that we are on this platform letting folks know that there are people who look like us, think like us, out here doing this work, and that we don't necessarily always agree with one another, but we're out here making sure that not only that justice is served, but that, that it is served on behalf of our people as well. So, I think that I'm just grateful to be in the room with you two. I'm grateful to be able to have this platform and to be able to create our own platforms, to be able to continue these conversations, because what you said is so important. We need to delve deeply into these things. And it's okay if you agree with us, if you disagree with us, but it's even better if you do your own work, if you delve into why this is happening legally, like part of why I became a lawyer is when I saw these issues come up for me, you know, the question I asked myself, if not me, then who? And if the people that don't look like me, you know, if people who look like me aren't doing this, well, then I have to be the one to stand up to do it. I never complain about something until I take steps to make it better. And I'm thankful that I'm amongst good people who are doing the same. And I urge the rest of you out there to also do that. Step into it. Don't wait for the leader. Become that leader. Don't wait for the answers. Seek them. Seek out the questions. Seek out the answers. Make sure that you are doing the work. Do the work.
Well said, Butterfly. Mustafa, what are you thankful for? First of all, I want to say I'm thankful that Mustafa got on that snippy little bow tie.
Hey,
and
now.
I'm thankful that I actually chose to wear the bow tie too. Woo-hoo-hoo. So
I'm thankful for family, not just my sort of my close-knit family, but also the extended family, the extended Black family, which I see is well represented here. I listen to the Fly Nubian Queens from time to time, listen to Voice Watkins from time to time. Actually, I think almost every single day. Now I think about it, it's not from time to time, it's actually every day. And I'm glad to see more networks. In the last year or so, and I don't know sort of what sparked it, I've been listening to a lot more, and if you want to say Black thought, Black thinkers, Black speakers, much more, and seeking them out. So what you say, you have to do your own investigation. And listen to what people in our own community have to say about certain things rather than always listen to people who are not Black. Not that I can't listen to that, but it's important that our community seeks out people from our own community and get our own opinion. And as Vanessa said, it's okay if you disagree, as long as you're having a conversation and continue the conversation.
Mm-hmm. And my thing is, it takes nothing. It takes nothing for them to plant stuff on you. We know all too well about how they planted drugs in the Black community, about how and that's why, you know, as Black people out there, I want to caution you, my Black brothers. I understand that because of slavery, sometimes because he wrote about this in Fire and Ice, that there is this and there is this white woman is put on the pedestal. Like, you know, I've been really I've perfected the white woman tears. I know how to whip out some white woman tears when I need them. Okay, I got some white woman tears. They work. They telling you they work. But so I guess that there's this desire to, you know, have her or woo her, or part of it is you rape my sister, you rape my mama, you rape my woman, so I'm about to fuck yours. And so there's that sometimes that some Black men go through and kind of get out there and dog them and do what they do. But I caution you because it seems to me that that's some expensive wop. That is some expensive wop. And when I say it's more than money, like Greenwood, Black Wall Street, and that was a situation. I don't even know if they were dating or not when it came to Black Wall Street in that situation, or if it was literally he just tripped on her, or they were good. We don't know. The stories are kind of muffled when it comes to that. But at the encounter, we do all know that he only tripped and accidentally fell on the poor young lady and was accused of rape. And there's all these countless stories of where there was consensual sex and the Black man loses his life because he touched that white woman. So I would just stay away from it if I was you. But who am I to judge? You are on Fly Nubian Queen Network, the network for melanated men and women like you. I am your host, Mary Dean Esquire, here at the WallStreetLawyer.com, and we're coming to you live, commenting with Black lawyers, talking about Bill Cosby getting out of jail. We are talking about, and I'm talking with Vanessa Olivier, former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney, and and Mustafa Indanusa, partner at DNIS. You got your .com? Throw it out there.
It's DNISlaw.com.
DNISlaw.com. So if you need an attorney, tell them your specialty.
Litigation. So I do criminal defense. I do civil cases, landlord-tenant, My office do immigration, personal injury like slip and falls and car accidents and those. So it's pretty much litigation.
Okay, so if that's what you're looking for, that's you can look no further to that guy. All right, so let's see. We talked about what else. What else are you thankful for, Vanessa? We can't never be too thankful.
No, I'm also thankful I'm thankful for some of these COVID restrictions being lifted and for some more freedom. I think that, we still got to be safe. And I'm definitely encouraging people out here to make sure that we recognize that, this thing is, still something you got to be cautious about. I'm still hearing reports of people getting sick and stuff like that. So please take care of yourselves. But to be able to be out and about a little bit more than we were before, after being kind of, for at least in my case, cooped up in the house for a significant period of time, and for my young people to be, I'm starting to really appreciate sunlight, appreciate outdoors, appreciate gatherings and being amongst people more so than before. And I'm praying that, we get more of that, because I think it's important for us to be in relationships. I'm thankful for those relationships being able to be renewed more than on the digital platform, but in real life, especially in these summer months. So very thankful for that.
That's a good one. Give us one more, Mr. Bowtie.
Life, but maybe I can give some advice for some of the people who are listening. Since we're talking about Black thought in this particular program and what you're disseminating and providing for people, what I try to encourage people to do when they listen to the media or listen to anybody is don't listen to somebody that tells you what to think. Listen to someone that tells you how to think. Because then you're able to, sort of segregate what is truth, what is lie, if you have sort of like some principles on how to think about things, rather than someone always just throwing information at you and you're just always soaking it up and just eating whatever they're dishing out to you. You don't stop to think, well, why should I believe this? Does this make sense? Or if this makes sense for this particular situation, well, why would it make sense for another situation? Right? So going back to the Bill Cosby situation, if, as the court said, this kid should have never happened, that he was promised something, and despite the promise, the prosecutor went and prosecuted him anyway, even though it was a successor to, I think it was Castro, right? It was a successor. Still, it was a promise that was made to him. No matter what I may think about Bill Cosby, good, bad, indifferent, well, that doesn't seem right. So why is it that people are upset that he got out of jail when it doesn't seem right what happened to him? And if this is what our system is all about, then we have to always be consistent. So that's why I encourage people to listen to people that teach you how to think, not people to tell you what to think. People to tell you what to think are very dangerous.
Well, let me tell you what I think. No.
I want to follow up on the stuff. I just want to say that I know a lot of our folks, especially, seeing everything that's happening with police brutality in the news. Like, I think that sometimes the legal system is just jumbled into these set of rules that people feel like, they don't, not only do they not understand, but that, it's used one way one day and changed the next. And I think that is the assessment that I hear from a lot of people, is just like, these rules that seem to be applied in different ways to different people. I hear that all the time. And I especially hear that from people who look like me. And I feel like, it's really important to do your due diligence and understand exactly what's happening on a procedural front. I think a lot of times, a lot of us have gotten tired of seeing what appears to be the rules applied one way for one set of folks and differently for us. And I understand those frustrations. I live those frustrations. You know what I mean? I make my career choices based on, those frustrations affect me just like they affect all the lay folks, not lawyers out there. But I do understand the importance of understanding those procedures before, we decide to just throw up our hands. Like, we really do have to do our best to understand. And that's a part of what our responsibility, I think, as lawyers. So tune into these kind of networks, ask those kind of questions of your lawyer friends. Like, I know I'm one of those people, if people ask me, I try to really explain it, because I really do want people to understand those procedures. So when it comes time to decide who we want to place in positions to either keep those procedures going or change those things, we have an understanding. We know what to ask those folks. We know what to ask our representatives, or we become those representatives ourselves. And I see more and more of us, you know, taking those leads. I see our numbers growing in law school. I see our numbers growing on the political front. And I know that, you know, that folks are getting tired, but I urge folks, you know, before giving up, really step up before giving up.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the legal system, be careful what you ask for, people. Right? Yeah. If you're not happy with what happened with Cosby, wait till when it happens to somebody you might actually like in the same exact situation. Like I'll give you an example of something. Maybe it's controversial. I watched almost the entire trial of Derek Chauvin, and Derek Chauvin got what he deserved. However, there were a lot of things that were very disturbing to me about what happened in that case. So people were happy. Great, was happy. No problem. He was convicted. No problem. But it's some of the things, the way that we got to the conviction, like some of the testimony that was given during his trial, that I'm like, that just doesn't seem right. One of the testimony is like the spark of life testimony. I don't know if you heard that during the trial, when his girlfriend came and she gave testimony about dehumanizing him. And people liked hearing that. They're like, oh, this is really going to get to tug to the heart of the jury. And I did a little bit of research. So I said, you know, why you should look into things yourself, just like what Mary was saying, investigating. So I did a little research into the spark of life testimony. It happened because there was a Black man that was accused of shooting or killing a cop. And during the trial of this Black man, the prosecutor gets up, and Vanessa, I don't know if you know the story, but you'll be shocked when you hear the punchline for the story. The prosecutor gets up and is doing his opening statement, I believe, starts talking about the police officer, his family, or whatever, and he chokes up, starts crying. And of course, the defense attorney jumps up and says, what the hell is this? The prosecutor has done this many times. Why are you, the prosecutor, choking up while you're giving this testimony about this man's background and his life? And it went up to the highest court in Minnesota, and the court basically said that it was okay. It was okay because a person, the victim in that particular case, the police officer that was dead, it's not just bones and sinew and blood and whatever. This person should be humanized. This person has a spark of life. Now, it sounds, to the average person, it sounds like that's a good thing. We should humanize a person. But how many Black men went to jail in Minnesota and elsewhere because of the spark of life testimony, which in my opinion is irrelevant. Whether you humanize a person or you don't humanize a person, what does that have to do whether or not this man that's sitting here actually killed that person? Why do I need to hear that? If the person actually did kill this person, then there should be enough evidence to convict him. We shouldn't have to rely on tugging onto the emotions of the jury. So it might look good when it's being used against Derek Chauvin, but how many Black men went to jail because of that same principle? And I saw that over and over again, many times during the Chauvin case. Yes, we applaud it, but how many Black men and women got the same thing used against them? So be careful what you ask for because of the legal system.
Well, the interesting thing about the whole spark of life is, what about those Black men? You say it was used against the Black men. Don't get that. They don't get any spark of life. They get to be. They are turned into animals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there no spark in life for those Black men?
In the way that people are being described, sometimes they're not. They're not described in a humanizing way. They tend to be dehumanized, as you just said. Yeah, there are multiple examples during the Derek Chauvin case of things that I found that were troubling to me. Maybe it's because I'm just a jaded criminal defense attorney. I don't know, maybe, but they were just very troubling to me. Some of the things that happened during that case that I wouldn't like to see repeated. And I just wonder how many other people sort of fell into that trap. And because we have a disgusting, white cop gets convicted, as much as that's great, what he did, he deserved to be convicted. I wouldn't want him to be convicted based on tactics that I know should not happen and to me have no place in court.
I guess that's also the powerful thing about appeal in terms of I don't know if either of you have had opportunities to like write any, but to have the opportunity to kind of do a bird's eye view of all these things and pull from all the strategies employed, during court, because like when these things are happening real time, that's one thing, right? And judges are making their decisions, and I've had judges make decisions that I think are ridiculous and that are, highly against what I, know to be the law and know to be the way things should go. And the one thing that I do appreciate about the appeal system, and even like all the way up to the Supreme Court, is the opportunity to pull those things and really take note of those things and make sure that if there are any injustices applied, that they can be like basically remediated and handled. Because I think that's what's happening in this instance, is that we get to look at those things and pull from everything that happened and all the decisions that were being made. So the legal system has ways to remedy itself. And I'm not just because I'm a lawyer standing behind it, because there's some things that I think that are, I've seen happen that I shake my head at to this day as a Black woman, as a woman, with regards to injustices. But I am glad that there are systems in place that can potentially make amends for and redress the wrongs done by the legal system. And unfortunately, in many cases in which I think that some wrongs are done and it can't be addressed, like in this instance, because there's not going to be a third trial, because that would be essentially further taking away Mr. Cosby's due process. There's things that I think that will never get to be heard because of some of the wrongs that were done earlier on in trial. That's what's shameful for me about this instance. But it's important that we look at these things not just from the emotional standpoint, but also systematic, in terms of like, looking at how all these things are playing out, and that we never forget that there might be some other ways to remedy some of these wrongs. I think a lot of times we forget that, and we look to the fact that maybe things were not done correctly, but there was a remedy in this case, right? And Bill Cosby's attorneys were able to pull at that. As attorneys, I think we need to start thinking about using all of the weapons in our arsenal to handle any kind of criminal wrongs done. Or not criminal wrongs, but wrongs done within the legal system.
Which brings up a good point. You said that, Mustafa, earlier you compared only because CNN and everybody else makes the comparison between Bill Cosby and O.J. Simpson. And you said, well, the only difference is that they were two Black men. There's white women. With Bill Cosby, it was Black, white women, I think all the rainbow, right?
Multiple. I think up to 60 different, if my memory serves, about 60 different
women.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's what. Wow. And the question is, how do you get to so many women now, and you didn't find all these women earlier?
Well, all it takes is one to come out. Sometimes that's the one that you need, is that has the courage to come out, is what gives the other women courage. With was Harvey Weinstein, it was just that one woman was the first one. Interestingly, Harvey Weinstein had has assaulted many other powerful women that never came out. It was the non-powerful women that came out, and then the powerful ones in Hollywood all started, oh yeah, it happened to me too. But sometimes it just takes one.
Hence the Me Too movement.
It just takes one for people to feel encouraged. I think it's important to note that simply because there was a delay in time does not make the story any less true. It's very, very, very common that women who are victims of sexual assault do not say anything. Sometimes they blame themselves. It's too embarrassing to say something. Who's going to believe me? There's so many different things that go into your thinking as to why people just put it in a box somewhere, put it to the side, and then somebody has the courage to come and say, yeah, that happened to me. And then you open that box. You finally feel the courage to actually open that box and say, yeah, it happened to me too. Yeah, same thing. Well, I'm so happy that you actually were able to come out and say something, because I would have never been able to do that. So when you see powerful women in Hollywood don't say anything, these are moneyed women that you would think have nothing to fear, right? The whole world would believe them. It's whoever. I don't even remember who some of his victims were, they don't say anything. How much so for women that are not even in the same situation?
So, okay. Do anybody have any last words? Any last words for our viewers out there in fly Nubian Queen land?
When I go to trial, sometimes, and I learn a lot of trial techniques from either watching trials or from sometimes from my opponents. One of the things I tell the jury during jury selection is that when you're inside a courtroom, it's totally different than being outside of the courtroom. So it's a whole different world. When you're on the outside and you're accused of committing a crime, usually we expect you to say, I didn't do it. If you don't say I didn't do it, you're guilty. In the courtroom, it's the total opposite. If you're in the courtroom and somebody accuses you of a crime and you don't say I didn't do it, it cannot be held against you until there's been evidence presented beyond a reasonable doubt. The reason why I mentioned that is that's exactly what we're looking at here with in the Cosby situation. It's a totally different world. You can't look at it the same way that you would if you're outside, right? Real innocence versus a legal innocence. It's a different thing. And that's the way you need to approach when you see the law. You don't have to necessarily like it. That's why even when you're doing jury instructions, they might ask the jury, or the judge will instruct the jury about the law. So you don't necessarily have to like it, but will you follow my instructions? Yes, Your Honor. And that's all that matters. You will follow the instructions. And that's what the Supreme Court basically did. They followed the instructions of the Constitution. And this is a decision that they made. It's totally different when you're in the courtroom, when you're dealing with the confines and the context of the law, than if you're in the outside world. And people just can't treat those two things as being the same.
Yeah, following up on that, being held, something being deemed a false accusation due to actual innocence, or a false accusation due to some kind of due process violation. They're two different things, and we have to separate those things in this instance to really get at the heart of what's happening. And in terms of getting into the literal innocence, it's we almost can't get there in this case because there was a violation that happened before we could even get there. So I just want folks to be aware of that, even in terms of Bill Cosby's statements right now, where he's saying, I'm still asserting my innocence. He's saying that, yes, I drugged these women, but I'm innocent of any kind of crime. And, he gets the right to make those kind of statements if he wants to, because he technically has not been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, given the overturn that just occurred. So, I urge folks to really understand what's really going on. And that doesn't mean you surrender your emotions, surrender your thoughts, surrender your instincts. I would never ask anybody to do those things. Those things have led me very, very far in life, but really understanding how this whole thing works is so crucial and critical before making statements just based on emotion. That's because that means that we are just allowing our emotions to lead and not really trying to understand everything that's going on here. It's critical you understand it. And it's critical that you understand every side of it. As an informed person, we have the ability and access to all the information to know everything that we need to know to prevent any kind of miscarriages of justice on our own behalf. And it's our responsibility to do that. We have to be responsible with regards to that. Does it make any atrocities that happen to us okay? Absolutely not. Does it make any kind of wrongs okay? No, but it's our responsibility to ensure that these things are addressed and redressed when need be. Our responsibility, nobody else's. We have everything that we need to get everything that we want.
And all I got to say is he ain't do it. No, I'm just he ain't do it. I'm so glad they let him out.
What is the it that he didn't do, though? That is the question.
He didn't do anything illegally. I played the video. I did my own 5 minutes worth of research. No, I've been doing research along the way and following it. But I say he ain't do it. And even if he did do it, he ain't do it.
No, I think there's some things that he did do and admitted to doing, but I think it's important to think of the context of the time, and all that other information. The question is,
if he did it, we all did it.
I definitely didn't do it. I definitely didn't do it.
I didn't do it, but if
I'm
I
just
did,
saying, like, can we even get to that when we're not ensuring like the most even playing field with respect to the law?
Well, I'm
That's
glad
the
you
issue.
keep saying that. We can't even get to the fact of discussing his innocence or not, because the case was thrown out, right? It was
Overturned.
what happened?
the case was overturned. However, it was
The
only
conviction, yeah.
overturned because we weren't even supposed to be having this discussion to begin with. That's the got you. We say we can't even get to his innocence, to debate his innocence or his guilty. The truth is, we were never even supposed to be talking about it because he had already signed a deal with the prosecutor and all that back in the day. So the fact that they tried it anyway, despite that, to risk being overturned by a court of higher authority tells me that it's some funny business going on here. I can't ignore that. They ain't gonna let no brother out not that brother if they ain't do nothing wrong. So we're not even supposed to be discussing his guilt or his innocence. That man was supposed to be at home in his bed these past 3 years. I think he paid that woman $2 million for touching her titty or something like that. Expensive. Huh?
I think it was 3.5 million, something like that.
Ooh, that's an expensive titty. That's all I got to say about that.
I think that we're supposed to. I disagree on that one. I think we're supposed to be discussing it, but I think that we really need to make sure that the process that's being used makes sense and is working so that we could get to the heart of these issues. And that's the problem.
I mean that he was never supposed. This case was never supposed to go to trial. That's why it got overturned. It was never supposed to go to trial. It wasn't, because it was never supposed to go to trial. So that means you can take from this moment and go back all up until the trial, all right before the trial. None of that was supposed to happen. The legal
I hear you, but was Castor really supposed like no one's really like getting at the heart of these immunity deals, right? In terms of like what is leading DAs to make these kinds of deals. Like I mean I've seen them, I'm aware of them, and I think that we shine a light on Cosby, but we need to be shining a light on the DA in terms of like when is it appropriate to use these kinds of deals. Typically, my understanding is we use them in order to catch a bigger fish than the fit. Like we allow immunity in order to do some further inquiries, and we give one person an opportunity to be immune so that we can maybe catch someone else or find out any additional information. But is that what was really being done here? And we could probably never know, because some of these things are, I don't want to say above our pay grade, but there's other things that's happening that we might not be aware of. But yeah, that's where I really want to shine my lens right now into like why that was even done in the first place.
Well, this is what Castro said. The district attorney finds insufficient credible and admissible evidence exists upon which any charge against Mr. Cosby could be sustained beyond a reasonable doubt. A conviction under the circumstances of this case would be unattainable. That's why Castro does not move forward with the prosecution initially, and then said, well, I think that Constant has a better chance in a civil suit, so we're not going to prosecute Cosby, but he will have to then testify at the civil suit, which is what he did. He testified, he gave testimony at a deposition in which he admitted to having used Quaaludes as a sedative to engage women in sex. He didn't actually say that he used it for the purpose without their knowledge, but he did admit to using that. And that's the testimony that was then used against him, along with the many different witnesses in the subsequent trial in which he was convicted. As I said before, in the initial trial, there was only one additional witness to Constant that was allowed to testify. The court in the initial trial, that judge, refused to allow all the other multiple witnesses. But in the second trial, they were allowed.
Thank you for that recap.
Yeah, thank you.
So again, we recognize that he never admitted to drugging women illegally. This is why he keeps proclaiming his innocence. From what I perceive, is that he's saying he partied. He partied with women. He partied. That's what they say. People that do them hard drugs, they party. So they partied. He partied with these women, but nothing was never not against their will. Now, did he, when you talk about maybe a civil lawsuit, right? Did he use his position sometimes in a way to get women to have sex with him, right? I remember, like I said, I remember one lady who sucked him off before he walked in the green room before he goes on stage. And he tells her, you know, put this in your mouth. Don't you like this? And she was like, you know, she didn't really want to do it, but she did it because it was Bill Cosby. Now, while I don't think that it's right for you to use your overpower a woman, if you sit there and do it, I always say victims and abusive people go together like a perfect marriage made in hell, like peanut butter and jelly sandwich. The peanut butter and the jelly, they are attracting to each other at that space. So I don't understand how I can later on scream rape if I voluntarily suck your thing. Maybe if I'm doing it for a job, maybe if I'm doing it for any of those other reasons, but does that mean that I'm raped or I'm stupid? I don't understand that because I don't have to do it. Now, if I say no and you make me do it anyway, and you say do it anyway, okay, now that's rape. Or if you just don't even, but you force it on me, that's rape. Or if you slip me some drugs behind my back while I don't know and you take it, that's rape. But if you telling me the pills are supposed to make me happy and they're my friends and I take them anyway, is that rape?
But the good thing about our system, as Vanessa was saying, is we don't have to retry that. That's something that a jury does. And again, going back to the fact that there were two different cases. In the first case, the defense, their strategy was sort of what you were saying, Mary. Their strategy was more, they partied. It was consensual. In the second case, where he was convicted, they took a different strategy. It was more, oh, she's just a gold digger, just trying to get his money, less on the consensual stuff. Did that impact how the jury took the testimony and what they accepted as true and not true? Perhaps, you know, who knows? But we weren't there, so we can't really comment too much on how the jury viewed the different testimony that was offered.
And not only that, we have to also take into consideration, as you both know, judges decide oftentimes based on their interpretation of the law, what juries are allowed to hear and what they're not, right?
Never
So
gets admitted.
in these two trials, if you were to look over trial test, I haven't looked over all the testimony from both, but I'm sure that like different information was presented in both, which is probably about part of the reason why we have different, while there were different decisions and rulings made. So a lot of like what is allowed to enter into a thing matters, and the way the laws interpret matter, and the fact that getting into these specifics, I feel like it's people are going to do it anyway because everybody's kind of their own judge, and I guess everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But without really delving deeply into the intricacies of all of the stories, without knowing all the nuances, I feel like is really important, not to just extrapolate some of this stuff to decide whether or not he's guilty or innocent in a literal sense, but in a legal sense, it's clear that due process was violated here, which is why we can't. It's hard to get to those other things because we're at a roadblock, we're at an impasse when it comes to that. And so when looking at it, we didn't bring up R. Kelly, we didn't bring up, Michael Jackson, we didn't bring and I feel like it's very interesting to kind of delve into kind of how so many of our leaders are, initially put on this pedestal and then knocked down. Do we, as people, how do we handle that? Do we stop putting folks on pedestals and just recognizing that even our most eloquent of speakers, our best artists, our most phenomenal athletes are still people that could potentially, have misgivings, whether it be criminal misgivings or just general misgivings, right? I think that that's where the rubber meets the road for me, where it's important for me to separate out, the things that a person accomplishes. Like, how do we still allow for the positive things that Bill Cosby has done for our community to last, or like with the understanding that he may have had some either criminal or civil misgivings as well, like, and like, not to do a direct comparison, but when I think of like an R. Kelly, there's some of his songs I listen to and I'm still grooving out when there's a lot of things about his character personally and in terms of the way I've seen things play out in terms of some of the cases against him that make me think that, he ain't the best of people. Like, in terms of from a moral standpoint, my moral standpoint, and I think that this is important stuff for us to talk about as a community. How do we maintain the legacies of our leaders by understanding that they may do some things that are in direct contradiction to what we think is the moral way to go? And we have to keep talking about that, because for me, like, there's some reprehensible things I can't stand behind, even though I may love your music, love your mission, love your work.
And who were you talking about again?
I mean, I was kind of going between all of them, but I was bringing up folks like, R. Kelly, or even a Michael Jackson. Like, we may all, I say we agree to disagree in terms of like the intricacies. There's some people who, stand behind the fact that no matter how many people came out against Michael Jackson with allegations of any kind of sexual misconduct, like they weren't buying it, and they just believe that that was all wrong, and they just stand behind his mission. There's still people who think that there might be some truth to some of those allegations, but they still rock with his music. Like, how do we, or even in R. Kelly, do you stand behind some of the music he puts out, even if you don't stand behind some of his actions and activities in terms of his dealings with minors, or some of the things that have come out against him with as far as sexual misconduct is concerned? How can we sever those things? I think that, of course we have to look at these people individually. I don't want to do a misjustice rather, by like putting that all together. But there's some overlapping themes that are similar between all these people in terms of, them doing something that we might consider great for our community as melanated folks, but some of their activities we might not be able to stand behind morally or otherwise. How do we reconcile those things? And I feel like, it's an ongoing conversation, and we can't be afraid of it, and we can't shy away from it, because how these men are vilified in the media is directly correlated to how they are also lifted up by the media at one point in their career. You can't usually have one without the other. So how do we rectify those things? And I don't necessarily think I have all the answers to it, but I do think that the conversation is an important one. And we started here, and I urge people not to be afraid of it. I see a lot of people just being like, I'm glad Bill Cosby's out, but I don't even want to get into it. I've seen a lot of people do that. And I think it's important to really like wrestle with and these conversations, and what steps can we take as melanated people to control the images of our leaders in the media to some extent, to have some more say so in terms of like how they're represented, and to be fair with them when and if they get in positions where they're knocked down off of those pedestals. I think one of the things that you touched on, you both touched on earlier, was the fact that when it's done to us in terms of having a leader that's knocked off the pedestal, they're not able to easily get back onto it as maybe some of our white counterparts. And that is important to address. Like, so many of our white counterparts who may do something similar will be, given a pat on the back and allowed to continue their lives in ways that we don't. Is that how we want to handle it? I don't know. I don't know. I really am. I'm torn about that. And I think a lot of other viewers are also torn, but I'm not afraid of the conversation. I think it's an important one.
Well, I think it's a modern day lynching, if you ask me personally. Strange fruit ain't hanging from the poplar tree no more. They are being crucified in our mass media. And when we can say conspiracy theory, all of them doing it. I don't say I don't say everybody's doing it, like whether it's right or wrong, but I think that at one point in time, not that very long ago, a woman was considered a woman at the age of 15 years old. This is why in Hispanic culture, they have a quinceañera. They made her put on a bride dress and everything, decked out gown, little 15-year-old girl. And so it has always been that by the time women are our age, we're supposed to be considered has been washed up and old maids, really and truly. So you were at your prime in your that was your baby making season, was your teenage years. This is what it's always been back in the day. I didn't make that up. This is how it was. Didn't Elvis Presley mess with a little girl? Didn't he marry her?
Priscilla, she was a minor.
They don't why is he not vilified? Why is his music not banned? Why was he not in prison? And so that's where you reconciling. He married her. It was accepted. It was not a big deal. But when these other people do certain things, it is vilified to the point of public lynching, in my opinion. Why? Why does these other people get away with so many things, and then when someone who has this kind of complexion do it, why are they being? Because I feel they will use whatever they can to take us down. That's they say this, and I've heard someone say we have to stop telling ourselves that in order, when you're a black person, you have to be 10 times better than your white counterpart. Mm-hmm. You have to stop telling black people that, because we have got to stop perpetuating that narrative for ourselves, speaking things into existence. So we need to start speaking the equality that we want to see. Even if you don't see it, speak it and you will see it. I digress. But when you think about it from that perspective, to me, that is exactly what that illustrates to me. That is exactly why people are saying, well, when they did it, no one said anything about it. This was common. This was what they did. Just like when we think about the crack epidemic of the 80s, look, they tried to make it seem like it was just only black people. And I went back and was doing research because I dealt with a lot of drug abuse and misuse in my family. So I was always interested in the drug culture. And I remember watching this documentary on drugs back from the 60s all the way back. And it was very interesting to me that they had in a Time magazine back in the 60s, 70s, when roaring, everybody was doing drugs. And they had a martini glass on the cover with cocaine in it. And in an article, they wrote about cocaine. And in the article, in the Time magazine, the article said that cocaine was no more addictive than potato chips. Literally. But this was just indicative of how everybody was doing it. Everybody they was joking about it on Saturday Night Live. It's almost like if you weren't doing it, you didn't know, you couldn't be in America at the time, because you wouldn't get the inside jokes on Saturday Night Live. You wouldn't understand the culture. You wouldn't be in the disco era. You couldn't do all of that stuff because you weren't partaking. And so as they kept cutting it, different people got a chance to partake. Now you too can partake in this America's favorite powder. And then when they cut it all the way down, and finally the brown and black people could afford to get it, it was the crack epidemic, and you had black folks all across the media killing each other behind this crack epidemic, and we were the ones that were vilified. We got the harsher crimes. So they finally cut America's favorite drug all the way down so that you poor people can now get it. And now we're going to throw you under the bridge. We're going to hit you with everything we got if you get sucked into it. It's a trap. They don't call it the trap house for nothing. And so for my mind, it just seems like these other brothers got caught in other traps. Whether it be the traps of the young girls, the traps of and look, money makes you mean. I'm gonna tell you something. I'm the WallStreetLawyer.com. Money, there was another documentary I saw. Does money make you mean? It changes you in a way. When you can buy women, you can buy this, you can buy that. You do walk around with a different kind of bravado and honcho about yourself. Come in, and Bill Cosby had money and power. He had TV power. He was America's dad. He had that kind of power. So I think that's what really made, he probably walked around with that and threw his power around, and he got whatever he wanted from women. But I don't know if he drugged women against their will. And I don't know if he had sex with women against their will. That I don't know.
And I think it'd be hard for us to ever know. I mean, you touched on a lot of really important things, and I don't think I could get to all of them. But in terms of like the comparisons, and that's what I was saying in terms of like, you want to compare the crack epidemic and all of the harsher sentences that we dealt with versus how meth is being handled, and how it's something that the legal system is really trying to redress by looking at programs and trying to help people, and and the folks who are showing up in court to deal with those crimes I'm not saying that all of them are predominantly white, but a number of them are. And I feel like, those things are being handled differently. And you mentioned those things, and you talked about those disparities, and disparities are real. Like in terms of disparate treatment, like this is real. The uh, there's been overwhelming statistics to prove that in terms of that, and how the legal system is swayed in ways against dark melanated folks. That's definitely something that I have not only read about but witnessed firsthand in my experiences as an attorney. But even down to representation in the beginnings, like many of the melanated folks that come in and get questioned a lot of times don't necessarily want to have the means or even ask for the type of attorneys that I see a lot of their white counterparts getting. So these are issues that I think are really important to get to. But when it comes down to Bill Cosby situation, or even a number of the other folks that we have mentioned, I think it is very, I think it's dangerous to say that it's just a conspiracy, and if they've done anything wrong, I don't want us to get to the point where we're looking the other way because folks are brown. But at the same time, I don't want us to ignore the fact that there has been disparate treatment over the course of time. So I think it's very important to be sensitive to the fact that we have over history been treated disparately by the law. That is, I think that there's enough evidence out there to show that. But at the same time, I don't think that we want to necessarily go the other end of the spectrum and not not ensure that when we do something wrong, it's redressed, it's addressed. I think that's important, that we have to look at both of it, both sides. We can't just say, it's a conspiracy, a CON conspiracy, so we shouldn't have to deal with the choices that we make. You know what I mean? At the same time, I chose to become a prosecutor because I thought it was just as important for brown and black faces to be represented, to take care of victims, because many of us are alleged victims in many of the crimes as much as we are the defendants. So I remember people asking me, why did you choose that career? How could you go against your community? And I'm just kind of like, it didn't make sense to me, because I was just like, as much as we might be the defendants, we are also victims of crimes. And I feel like we get to be protected on both ends. Our due process rights as defendants get to be protected, and so do victims who've been actually violated. And I don't want to leave them out of the conversation, but just because our system has been disproportionately egregious to defendants that look like us.
Mm-hmm. Anything you want to say, Mustafa?
I think Vanessa said it all.
Yeah, and I do want to be sensitive to the victims. I think that sometimes, because I have worked with victims and because I was a victim at one point, the only way that you can make a victim is someone who is overpowered, like a baby, right? Or a child, or someone who just doesn't have enough power to fight for themselves. And so the only way that you cannot be a victim is to declare that you have enough power to fight for yourself. And so you can't, in working with victims, I find that you kind of can't have it both ways. If I let the victims come into my office, which we would often do, the victims would come in and they would cry on our shoulders, and we would, the big bad bully, let me go in court and take you away from this bully and give you all the money and some support that you need to help you get yourself together. You get away, you big bad bully. And without doing any accountability work for the victim, when we treated the victim like that, what you found was that next week she'd be with another one. Somehow every man she beat, just meat just coming upside her head. And there's a reason for that. And if no one has enough balls to have these women be accountable for themselves, then they lose the opportunity for self-growth, so that they do not have to be a victim. And the first thing in saying I'm not a victim is that I am strong enough to speak up for myself, that I have my own voice, that I am my first line of defense, that I can say no, or I can fight back, and I can do for myself, and I am strong, and I am powerful, and I can. You have part of that is either you're gonna be a victim, meaning that you're weak, you can't take up for yourself, you're less than. And if I can't see that these in the situations, if I don't hear that from the woman, or if I don't hear that in your testimony, there are some women that are especially young children that are taken at a point where they don't have the ability to speak up for themselves, and they don't have the ability to fight back. Or when women are trying to fight back because the male aggressor is that much bigger and stronger and power than her, he overpowers her and takes advantage of her. If I don't hear the take advantage part and the overpowering part, then I don't know.
I think it's important to empower. Like, I don't disagree with you about empowerment of victims, but I don't think that should in any way stop us from making sure that people who do harm to these women pay for it. I think that we have to separate those issues. Like, and I don't think that and I think it's important not to further victimize victims because they can't necessarily learn how to step into their power, because that's a process, Mary. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like not everybody that's why we're here, and that's why this system exists the way it does, because that's a process that not everyone's ready for, or that, you know, some people just can't, as you mentioned, children, or, you know, folks that are it's not just physical power differentials. We're also talking about relationships. You know, sometimes student teacher, like we have, there's a lot of nuances to this. So talking about it generally, I think, you know, I know we're talking about specific to Cosby,
pastor, clergy.
There's a lot of sensitive, yeah, and those things matter.
That's why. Oh no, you don't went too far. You don't use God.
But that's why, as you know, that even the legal system takes into consideration those power differentials when making those decisions as well. Some of those special relationships play out in the legal system. But yeah, that to me is separate and apart from, if a person does wrong, they need to answer, and as if we can prove that they've done wrong, they need to answer to that. You know what I mean? And I feel like I don't want to conflate those two or pull those two things together, because our ability to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone has done something wrong is separate and apart from whether or not a victim is empowered or not. You know, I don't want us to get in the habit of saying, oh, because our white counterparts don't have to be accountable, or don't seem to be held accountable in the same way that we are, that we shouldn't get to be accountable, because we get victimized as much as our white counterparts do. And we want to have the legal system. I think the goal is to have it work efficiently for everybody, despite their background. And that is more where I think we need to be putting our energies right now, because, you know, right now what we're seeing is all the flaws, you know, in terms of police brutality cases, in terms of disparate treatment, in terms of all those things. Those are the things that get highlighted, especially when we have these kinds of like results where, you know, after 3 years, this man can be released before completion of, I think it was a 3 to 10 year sentence, which, you know, some could argue he did his time anyway, because I believe he was.
I know, poor thing.
Depending how you look at it.
Right, or he may be guilty. I don't know, and you're right in that regard. I think the interesting thing is we say that, and we say that we can't try the case, but the case is being tried in the mass media.
It is.
In the court of public opinion. And so that's where that's not fair. If he did say he keep proclaiming his innocence, look, they knew they was taking the pills. They knew they was giving me sloppy toppy. They knew what they was doing. So he's keep proclaiming his innocence. Is this fair to him to have to? Let's say if he is innocent, I don't know. Only God can judge. But if he is, this old man done sat in jail for 3 years. And he's been tried guilty. He has been tried as guilty in the court of public opinion. There is not anybody. The reason why people are split down the middle is because some people are really, really convinced that he is guilty. He's guilty. Guilty. That's why everybody is in such an uproar, because they already believe that the man is guilty. So I don't know if that's fair.
On the flip side, though, you know, I'm gonna be on the flip side in terms of, is it fair that the people who accused him of any kind of wrong now may never have their full story told because the prosecutor made a deal with him and gave him immunity without, I'm sure, without consulting many of these women who were alleged victims of this man, and gave him immunity before we could even really get to the true heart of everything that happened here. I feel like that's important to recognize. Like when the system is working at its best, and whatever that is, then we can get at the heart of the story, because we're following all the steps to be able to allow these voices to be heard, to be able to allow testimony to be given, to be able to allow all the sides to be able to prove what it is they want to prove and disprove what it is they have to prove. We couldn't even get to that here. And that's the real injustice, in my opinion. Decisions were made, and that stopped the flow of things being able to go the way that it would have maybe been able to go if that agreement, that plea deal was, well, not plea, but that immunity provision wasn't offered and given before we even got to trial. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in my opinion, we kind of have to look at like all the levels and the layers of this and go back to how these decisions are being made. Because, God forbid this were to happen again. At what point, who do we hold responsible at the various levels of this? Because right now, I'm shining a light on the prosecutorial dealings beforehand, because these kind of dealings happen in a lot of cases. Some come to light and some never come to light. And it's important that we actually take a look at that, because do we want that to be the way in which justice or injustice is plays out? You know what I mean? These backdoor dealings are important to look at.
Is the real tragedy in this case, or maybe not even tragedy, but the real bad actor is really Castro, the prosecutor. So before we went live, Vanessa and I were talking about, I posed the question, did Cosby get the deal from Castro that he did because he's Bill Cosby? Had he been somebody else, he wouldn't have gotten that deal. Because if we were really to look into what Castro said as to why he didn't prosecute Cosby, we are left with only one way to look at things, which is that there wasn't enough. Because according to Castro himself, there wasn't enough to prosecute. He didn't believe he could prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. He could sustain that case to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, which says, what's the old saying? You can indict a ham sandwich. He didn't feel you can indict Cosby. So just looking at what Castro said, there was nothing there, or not that there wasn't nothing there, but legally there wasn't enough for them to even take this case forward so that he could be potentially be indicted. Did Castro take that position and give Cosby a sweetheart deal because he's Cosby? And then the next person came and said, I don't care, it's Bill Cosby. I don't care what Castro did. I'm going to move forward without thinking about the consequences that, oh, wait a minute. If Castro gave him this deal, I can't then go and turn around and try to prosecute him nonetheless, which is sort of, no matter how you cut it, is a tragedy that happened as a result of the decisions that the prosecutors made. The decision that the Castro made in terms of not prosecuting Cosby, and then the decision that was then made subsequently in prosecuting Cosby, despite the fact that he had been given a deal.
And so, can you say that one more time? Did you say that the Castro decided not to prosecute Cosby because he didn't have enough evidence?
Yeah, that's the language that I was reading before. Castro's, he wasn't even something formal. It was really informal. It was like in a press release. He said the district attorney finds insufficient credible and admissible evidence exists upon which any charge against Mr. Cosby could be sustained beyond a reasonable doubt. If you just look at that language, this is what Castro, the initial 2005, when the crime was just 1 year old, right? Castro says there wasn't sufficient credible and admissible evidence to sustain this case beyond a reasonable doubt. And if a prosecutor, if we had to take Castro at his word, if a prosecutor believes that there isn't enough evidence to prosecute a case, then the prosecutor has an ethical obligation not to prosecute the case.
Absolutely.
And that's what Castro did. So if you take Castro at his word, there wasn't enough credible evidence, and it had to come from sometime later. So what was the credible evidence that then supported the case against Bill Cosby? It ended up being, well, besides the witnesses, it ended up being the deposition transcript that was unearthed later that was used against him. That deposition transcript had to be unsealed by the federal court so that the new prosecutor could use it against Cosby. Okay. So in a way, Castro is to blame, and maybe in a way he's not to blame, because he just said, look, from what I see, there was no evidence. But then by giving Cosby this sort of get out of jail card, saying I'm not going to prosecute you, that placed Cosby in the position of now sort of telling on himself by saying, yes, I use Quaaludes. Not necessarily in a deceptive way, but yes, I use that in a sexual situation. And then that evidence ended up being used against him. And now we find ourselves in this situation.
Mm-hmm. So that is interesting. That's an interesting thing to say. That's very good, because I read some of this stuff. It's been so long. This has been a long time coming, because the first trial was so long ago, right? It was like 2018, or was it even before that?
2018 was when the sentence was given. In 2018, he's been in jail ever since. But like a lot of these things, like I mean, everything kind of back to 2004.
2004. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, it seems like this has been going on for years and years and years.
2004 is when the incident happened.
When the incident occurred, yeah.
Right. Okay. 2005 is when Castro said, I'm not going to prosecute. Then 10 years later, the new prosecutor, I think it was Risa Furman, I think is her name, said, well, let's unseal this deposition transcript from his civil case. Let's find out what he said. And then once they found out what he said, well, now let's prosecute him based on his own admission.
I think it was Kevin Steele that was the new DA that took on the matter. I hope I'm not incorrect, but I believe it was Kevin Steele. And I think that they even brought it up like close to the point where the statute of limitation had almost run out. So the timing of all these things are very interesting, and it doesn't make for a clean case. And there are a lot of parts of it that definitely raise eyebrows and red flags. So I'm definitely, as an attorney and as a layman, just looking at it like, absolutely, there's no denying of any of that. But yeah, I think that it's important to kind of like really kind of look at these nuances, because they are definitely buried under the surface.
Hearing that breakdown from Mustafa, who's done this so eloquently, you guys, remember that Mustafa is partner at NDIS, what's DNIS.com, right?
Absolutely.
DNISlaw.com.
DNISlaw.com. He's a litigation specialist, and as you can see, he broke down his trials so very eloquently for us. So he got me convinced that this was a public lynching. No, I'm just kidding. And you are tuned into Fly Nubian Queen Network, the network for melanated people like you. I am your host, Mary Dean Esquire, here at thewallstreetlawyer.com. And we have been discussing Bill Cosby. We've been discussing it for a while. Now I'm going to let these good old lawyers go, because I know y'all got plenty of work to do. But absolutely, I'm going to bring them back again, because I really appreciated this litigation dialogue. My lawyer brain is just all feeling all good on the inside. Kind of like how my grandma used to feel in church when she would get happy. That's how happy I am right now. I have enjoyed this time with you. I want to thank you guys for being my guests tonight. And is there any final words that you want to have for our people out there in TV land, internet land?
Thank you for having us. Thank you for opening this dialogue. And I hope that other people chime in, join in, do their own research. And yeah, we appreciate the platform and the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.